If you love what we do, then please consider supporting CryptFail on Patreon. Your support helps us grow and to create more content more often. And now, on with the show.
I do not believe she would have the means to hire a servant. Did you see into the other room while we were there?
No. My attention was focused on the child.
The room that we were in is the only one that is well kept. It seemed to me as though they are living in that one room while the rest of the house is in disrepair.
I did get a sense that the lady may not have been well off, but maybe she is destitute. Perhaps the husband was gambling, hence his demise, but I wonder if the real reasons of finding the sword is to maybe recover some of the debt.
It is possible.
So an unkempt house. She ignores the child, so she quite possibly had a fall from grace.
Would that influence her behavior toward her child?
But I still sensed that she had really no love for the child.
I do not think she loves him.
Maybe he reminds her of her husband?
Perhaps.
The main road is well maintained. You travel for almost 3 days before setting out on a side path that becomes increasingly smaller and rougher as the undergrowth encroaches upon the path. Finally, leaving the edge of the forest, you can see the village ahead. It is a collection of about 15 buildings, and the wood on many of them is chipped. The paint has peeled. On the outskirts, dust swirls from the fields. Several peasants move about hunched over.
I wonder why the lady's husband would have been here.
It's definitely out of the way and not as prosperous as what I originally thought.
So, we need only go and ask for the swords?
I assume so, but who in this town? Oh.
Oh?
I certainly would have bartered the swords for essentials.
Well, I suppose if that is the case, we shall have to deal with it, but we should still ask in the case that they have not. Should we ask one of the villagers who we could speak to about an important matter?
And as you approach, there's about 5 peasants, and they're all on their knees with their heads to the ground.
And Chiaki looks rather uncomfortable with the whole thing.
Rin walks forward to the peasants. You may rise.
And they come to a more sitting position.
My master is here for Lord Nagayo. She also seeks the property of Lord Nagayo.
And the peasants are looking down. They're not looking at any of you. And one that's about middle-aged. You can tell they're in an awkward position. As in, they don't want to not say anything, but they don't know what they should say. You can sort of feel these are simple farmers, and you can just feel that they're not trying to make the situation more difficult, because obviously they're afraid of getting killed if it goes wrong, because they don't know your character, like, you know, your intentions, your character, who you are. But they obviously know something. And they sort of look at each other quickly as if trying to work out what to do. And then the middle-aged man, who's starting to bald and looks like life has been not always the easiest. It might be best to speak to Yadoya. He is our innkeeper, but probably he is the one we go to when we have trouble.
We would be very pleased to speak to Yadoya-san in that case.
And one peasant on the far right sort of smacks the one next to him, and he sort of like looks at him, and he's like, and he gets up, and he's bowing. Please follow me, and he heads off down the street, kicking up dust as he walks. And there's a building. It's a little larger, but not by much, because there's not many. There might only be 100 people, 150 people maybe at max in this village. And he opens the door, slides it open, and then he steps to one side and then does a low bow and stays there. Clean, but very functional. There's not really any elegance to it. There is a man, he's about 55, 60. He has a long ponytail and a long beard. He has one wooden leg from below the knee. And he turns and he bows. Not quite as low as the peasants do. And the innkeeper picks up a jar and 3 cups and motions to a table. And he puts it there.
He does not seem as concerned as the other villagers. Which is our relief.
Yes, that is good. Perhaps he may be easier to converse with. And Rin waits patiently.
And he comes back with the pot. He's left the cups there. They're very basic cups, but they're clean. And places the pot of tea in the centre of the table.
We're here to see Adoya-san.
That would be me.
We were told that you would be the best person to ask about...
Lord Nagao.
Yes.
Ah. And he picks up a wooden sort of box and places it down and sits on it. He says, if you're looking for Nagao-san, he's on the outskirts of town in our cemetery.
He was buried here.
As was his request, yes.
Would you know why he made this request?
Please understand I mean no offence when I say any of this. You've asked a direct question. A direct answer is warranted, but it may not be the answer that you want.
I see.
He was very unhappy with being a samurai.
Unhappy? Did he come to live here then?
As much as he was able, I believe. It was... I don't know all that went on. I don't know all his true feelings. I know some. He did not like being a samurai. It was not something that brought him any joy or sense of well-being. And any opportunity that he had, he lived as a peasant. He was most happy working in the fields.
His son, did he live here as well?
I don't know that he had any other family of any sort. He was living with Itsuko. Well, older than you, but a young girl and her brother on the outskirts of town. I think they wanted to be married, but of course there was... him being a samurai made that difficult.
Yes, it would. Would you know, were his personal effects buried with him, or are they elsewhere?
I believe some were not. He was buried in his farming attire, as was his wish. We buried his kimono and travelling clothes with him. He would arrive... everybody knew he was samurai. He would arrive in his samurai gear and then change after going to Atsuko. And he worked as hard as any peasant in the field.
Do you believe that Itsuko would speak with us?
I don't think she would have much choice otherwise. You are samurai.
Ah.
My master says we will speak to Atsuka-san tomorrow, but for now she is tired and would like accommodation for the remainder of the day and the night.
Very good. Our premises are very simple, but keeps the rain out.
Daisuke turns to Yodoya. My master wishes to thank you, Yodoya-san, for your candor.
You are welcome. And he bows.
And she pulls out a couple of coin and places them carefully on the table next to the pot of tea before retiring for the afternoon and then probably for the evening.
Chiaki will follow Rin to the room. What's the
No, I'm just thinking.
Ah.
Is that you telling
That's
me what my
crickets.
brain is doing? Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Saito-san, I have a question.
And she nods.
Should I speak to Nagayo-san?
Rin's looking very confused. And her face contorts almost quickly and then settles back to normality. And as she speaks,
Yes, I could try. It doesn't always work. I don't know exactly how to explain. Spirits don't always leave.
if you think you can.
All right. Perhaps we should speak to Itsuko first, and if she does not have...
Rin nods at that.
If she doesn't have the answers we need, I could try. Truthfully, it is easier to talk to spirits than villagers who are terrified.
As she walks to Atsuko's house.
And it's a pretty simple dwelling overall.
Well, Rin stands at the door and Daisuke just knocks on the side.
And the door opens and a male in his 20s, wearing simple peasant garb and dark hair, is looking at you. And he bows, but he's definitely curious.
And Daisuke sort of steps up next to Rin, who's looking up at this young peasant. My master Saito-san would like to speak to Atsuka-san.
And he steps back and says, "Please enter." And it's a very simple hut, very simple designs. There's a few little knickknacks around, but it's clear they do not have much money. And he kneels down on one side, and you can see that there is a girl, also in probably her 20s. Long, straight black hair. Pretty for a peasant. Not so much that peasants can't be pretty, but life can be harder where you've got to work in the fields and stuff like that, and sometimes the years can age people sooner, but she's quite pretty, and she's kneeling down. Her kimono is simple, and it's stained, but not filthy. It looks like, it's work-related and dirt from fields and stuff like that.
My master, Miss Saito-san, would like to know, Atsuka-san, about Lord Nagayo.
And she looks a little bit defiant and a little bit wide-eyed. And she replies, "What is it you want to know, Samurai-san?"
In all honesty, Miss Atsuka-san, and Daisuke is looking a little bit uncomfortable. My master, Miss Sato-san, has been sent here by the wife of the late Lord Nagayo to retrieve some personal effects of his, namely the daisho.
And she places her palms flat on the floor and bows very low, placing her forehead upon the top of her hands. And she says, "I mean absolutely no disrespect. I have them, but I will not give them back." Nagayo didn't want to be a samurai. He was very happy being here with me, living with us.
If he did not want to be a samurai, why do you wish to keep what would remind you of what he did not want to be?
They are the only physical item that I have left from him.
I'm sorry, but Lord Nagayo had commitments as a samurai.
Is it the swords specifically are not significant? It is because they belonged to him. If we could find a memento of similar significance, would that be acceptable?
And she's pondering this. The brother says, he bows, "Is there a reward for returning the swords?"
We have money to pay for the swords, yes, although it sounds now as though that is not the only consideration.
And she looks at her brother with a big angry frown and says, "I don't want the money. Be reasonable, Atsuko." And he bows and he looks at Daisuke, mainly because Daisuke's been the one that's been talking and it's more natural to do that. "If you can give me tonight, I'm sure I can talk sense into her. And I can bring you the swords tomorrow. Where are you staying?"
We are staying at the inn in the centre of town.
Excellent. She's grieving and she's not thinking straight.
And forgive me, but I do not want to offend by prying, but may I ask as to how Lord Nagio came to pass from this world?
He was coming back from the shrine, and there is occasional bandits. They thought that he had more money than he did, and they killed him. That way is a shortcut to another town which has some gambling houses. It's possible they thought he was gambling and had made some coin.
And did anyone see these bandits?
No, he was alone. One of the other villagers found his body later in the day, and we brought him back.
And Chiaki's looking to the other two like, do you have anything else to do here? Because I don't.
I guess I'll go to the cemetery then.
And it's...
Yep, Chiaki wants to go there.
It's a basic cemetery. It doesn't look like a Western one. There's not headstones and crosses.
If neither of you object, then I would like to try to speak to Lord Nagayo.
Rin shakes her head, and Daisuke takes a few steps back and turns and faces away.
Oh, odd. Chiaki is going to kneel down in front of the grave and close her eyes and basically begin her process of attempting to speak to a spirit, which involves sitting very still and very quiet and paying great attention to her surroundings and sort of reaching out with her mind to try and find a ghost.
Daisuke can see, in the field next to him, a misty apparition with a implement digging in the dirt.
Daisuke takes a couple of steps back.
And hearing the sudden movement, Chiaki is going to open her eyes and turn, and does she also see this farmer ghost? Excellent. So she's going to quietly stand and walk over.
And the ghost sort of seems aware of you and sort of doesn't at the same way. He sort of stands up and stretches and mops his brow.
You are Nagayo-san, yes?
And he nods.
Do you remember what happened?
Lady Chuku was so mad.
She seems the type. What do you mean?
All about keeping up appearances, not being invited to the galas and the events and the balls that she so desperately feels she is entitled to.
She is very interested in appearances. She sent us here to retrieve your daisho.
Why should she do that?
She believes she is entitled to them as your widow.
He looks a little confused. The only thing that has died is my samurai heritage.
How has it died?
And he motions to the field around him. This is where I belong. In the earth here.
It is in the earth here that you will stay.
And we'll be content then.
I am glad. Are there any things you own here that are dear to you?
Only Atsuko, but I don't own her.
If you had to leave, and you could leave her one thing to remember you by, what would it be?
Any pauses? Any things? My daisho. As a symbol of rebirth. The end of one life in the symbolism of the sword and the start of something new.
I see. Well, I have only 2 more questions for you, and I shall leave you to the field. If you had to leave Atsuko, and you could give her a message, what would it be?
That I love her very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing her again.
And would you leave a message for your son?
I do not have a son.
I see. Well, I should leave you to your work.
Always much to do.
I imagine there is. And she will turn and walk back towards where Rin and Daisuke have gone.
And he returns to the mists.
Not very helpful, I suppose.
And Rin's got a frown on her face as she's looking a little bit perplexed.
What is it, Saito-san?
And she signs the sun as in a question.
I do not know. I do not believe he was lying. I am unaware if his spirit simply did not remember or if there is a deeper meaning. I had hoped that he could suggest something we could give Atsuko instead of the daisho. However, clearly that did not go as I hoped. He did not remember having died, so I could not ask about the manner of his death. But to be honest, I find it rather odd that no one from the village is known to have informed Lord Now.
The lady was angry.
She was, and he mentioned that she only cares about appearances. I cannot imagine it's good for keeping up appearances when your husband leaves to live as a farmer. His wish is for Atsuko to keep them. Well, the wife has a claim to them. It feels cruel to take them.
Saito-san says that Lady Chuku's claim is valid to the daisho, despite Lord Nagao's request that they remain here with Atsuko-san. Atsuko-san has no valid claim over the swords. Whether they were in love or not is irrelevant. And Rin signs some more, pretty fast and furious. He was samurai. Therefore, his family are samurai. They have rightful claim to the daisho, so...
Lady Chuku has no desire to honor him as samurai in death. She only wishes for the daisho.
Rin signs that is irrelevant.
It seems that she should not be able to have it both ways.
And Rin takes a deep breath and signs again. That is irrelevant.
I see.
Saito-san says that Lord Nagao should not have even died here. The fact that he wanted to not be a samurai still does not mean that...
Well, I believe he would have chosen to die here. I do not believe he did. His death was someone else's decision.
So it was his decision.
It was his decision to be here, not to die.
Again, and she signs, that was his personal decision, not to be samurai.
Is that so wrong?
And she looks a little bit confused at Chiaki. And she slowly signs, of course it is. The way that she signed was a little bit hesitant. And her face even betrays what she's actually signing to you.
Would her claim to the daisho be valid if she had something to do with his death?
And Rin turns to Daisuke and a flurry of hands and facial expressions. And Daisuke looks at Chiaki. Miss Saito-san says that whether or not Lady Chuku had anything to do with his death is still irrelevant. Even if we could prove it, it would have to be pretty strong evidence to prove that she was involved. And even then, Lord Now may not even consider that as evidence. So ultimately, the decision would be up to Lord Now, but Miss Saito-san thinks that any involvement by Lady Chuku is irrelevant.
I see. Well, I am glad that he is buried here. And she will stop talking.
And Rin turns back to Chiaki and signs to her, "Shall we retire?"
I will return later. I am going for a walk. And she heads to the forest. Also, Chiaki's not going to go back to the inn that night, because thinking about it, she would not. She'd get too stressed about it. She'd be like, I can't go back. Rin's mad. So she's just in the woods.
Probably around the middle of the night, depending on where you are in the woods. You can hear someone walking through the woods who's not being overly quiet. And Daisuke's voice calls out. Not calls out loudly, but...
Yes?
What are you doing out here?
Nothing.
Miss Saito-san is both worried and a little upset.
That's why I stayed here.
She sent me out to look for you.
Well, you found me, so...
I fear if you stay out here all night, Miss Saito-san's anger's only going to grow.
Then perhaps I should continue to stay.
Why? And he looks a little bit flabbergasted.
Why, what?
What? Why would you continue to stay out here?
Why not? I made her angry.
No, you didn't make her angry. It's... Rin made herself angry.
I doubt that is true. If I had not disagreed with her, she would not be angry.
It's not that you disagreed with her. She agrees with you, but you didn't make her angry. It's the decisions that she's had to make is making her angry.
You don't ever just want to leave?
Me? No. So as you can see, it was never you that made her angry. I don't think that you could make her angry. It's the conflict within her.
I am certain that I could if I tried. I still don't want to go back.
What should I tell Miss Saito-san?
Nothing. If I don't go, she'll probably just be angry at you. So I will.
And Daisuke sort of sighs a sigh of relief.
And she sighs, not a sigh of relief, and stands up from the ground where she was sitting. The Legend of the Five Rings role-playing game is available from Edge Studios, starring RavenInsane as Rin, Emily as Chiaki, and Ghost as the storyteller. Sounds and music were provided by Sirenscape and Nash Music Library. This has been a Crit Fail production. Thank you very much for listening.